Okay, here we are, episode 11. What are we talking about? Oh yeah, sticky hands. Alright, we're finally there. We're finally to the sticky hands. Hopefully you've been working on the basics that you need to get to this point. I know everyone always wants to jump to sticky hands, but if you can't do the basic stuff, this will look really ugly. Okay? Why don't we talk a little bit about what we're doing here. We're going to start off with just single sticky hands. That's how everything always starts off. One hand first. There's also lopsaw and then double sticky hands, but we'll start off with single sticky hands. Let's begin here. Okay, we'll start from this position here. Let's break down everything from the beginning. In this position, I'm in Tanza. My main motion for me in this particular position will be Tan to Bong. Okay, Tan and Bong. Robert's position here will basically be low fuksao to high fuksao, unless we change sides. Okay. From this position, we're currently neutral with each other. In other words, not one person has the advantage over the other. In other words, I have a line to shoot at him, he has a line to shoot at me. One of the things that you want to pay attention to when you're doing this is make sure you're covering your own center. So in other words, something as simple as tan and bong sao, right? There's precision in placement. If you have tan sao and you're pushing off to the side, bong sao you're overcutting it, that's no good. You want to be aiming your target point is that individual center, and you want to aim directly into that individual center. And a lot of times when you end up sticky hands, there's a force that happens when you touch here. Okay, he feels you push, you feel him push. And what usually ends up happening is, instead of aiming towards this target point which you're trying to hit, you end up aiming towards his hand and he ends up aiming towards your hand. So a perfect example is, he's pushing too much hard this way, I'm pushing back this way. If I let go, he ends up going that way. That is probably the #1 most misinterpreted thing regarding sticky hands. The forward energy or spring motion of Wing Chun. Okay? What does that mean? If we're here in this position and he's pushing towards my bong, right? In other words, when what's the saying? When the force leaves, he basically will spring forward naturally from that. The problem with that is he's basing his technique on my particular structure. So what that means is, if I'm here, I'm standing next to Robert. If I lean all my weight here on Robert, he walks away. Boom. Yeah, I spring forward, but I have no control when I spring forward. I'm basing all my structure based on his technique. I'm the same thing here. He moves away. I still have control of my own technique. That's the thing you have to remember. Okay, not that he's here pushing against you, and then as soon as you let go, he automatically just leaves that point. That doesn't mean you have control of that technique. So that is the #1 thing to remember. Don't push towards that technique. Okay? Alright, so from this position, let's break down some of the motions here. It looks simple, like you see a lot of people do different variations of chi sao. They're going like this. You know? We're touching hands, we're doing sticky hands. Or we're doing this and do the push. Look at this forward energy. We're really drilling it in. You can really feel my power. Alright. Natural. Make it natural. Good Lord, don't look that bad when you're doing the sticky hands, alright? Natural means by just doing the natural motion, I do bong sao, I do tan sao, just like this. He does fuksao. The fuksao motion moves forward naturally. See? Just like this. Forward. Here. Without putting emphasis in it, without being too limp or too tight in doing it, you already have that forward motion. Okay? See how I'm just doing it naturally from this point? I'm not trying to drill it like here and try to spring it forward like this. Okay? And a lot of times when you see that, what happens with that person's stance? If Robert's pushing, you see the people rocking back and forth. That's a clear indication that your stance also sucks too. Alright? When force is actually right, you don't get rocked from your stance from it. Okay? Alright? See how smooth we're basically moving the motion here? One of the things that you want to develop when you're doing the sticky hand motion, and here we're just talking about the rolling hand motion, is the mentality behind what you're doing. You are developing sensitivity. You're developing the 5 basic principles of power, positioning, posture, timing, and distance. Your main goal and your main concern is not being, whoa, I tagged him, I hit him. Or he blocked me and you go, he punches and you block like this erratically and you're like, oh, I blocked it. Okay? It's at this particular stage in the very beginning, you're both helping each other do a particular, with your sensitivity. So, for example, let's do an example where we're doing single sticky hands right now. If I'm working with Robert, okay, and I hard to see at this angle. If he's brand new, all of a sudden common for people to be pushing, he's supposed to be from here to here aiming to my center line. But let's say I don't know what I'm doing and I'm going here. See how I'm going past the center line, but he ends up following that point? Well, when you're working with somebody, what happens? I actually have to help the student in the beginning, make sure he's aiming towards my center. Because in the beginning, he's going along with the ride. It's always the case. Even if I tell you, don't go along for the ride, it's hard to understand and digest that in the beginning. So here I make sure he aims towards my center. He aims towards my center. He aims towards my center. See, when he works with me, it's easy to do. But if he works with someone who doesn't know what he's doing, sometimes you can end up going for the ride. The next thing you know, he's falling this point off. Okay? The hands function as a target point. That means if my hand's here, he wants to be aiming towards my center, to shoot for my center. He doesn't want to be following my hand. Next thing you know, he's over here. Alright? Target point is always here, so you have to be aware of where the target point is. So for here, look at the Fuchsal. Fuchsal motion is from here, going forward, forward. There's tons of detail on that, but let's just keep it simple for now. Right? Elbow push, elbow push. Okay? Now, one of the things you want to think of is when you're dealing with the sticky hands, this is the point of contact, the wrist-to-wrist part that you're doing. But a lot of times what happens is, when I go here to bong, he goes here to bong. This initial point of power, you don't want to go 2 pounds, it makes it 3 pounds, 5 pounds, 6 pounds, where you're pushing against each other. You want to let the energy flow, or the natural flow and release of the technique happen. So, starting from here, from the shoulder to the elbow to the fingertip, the index finger, he wants to be able, if I put a little pressure on his technique, right? You can almost see how his body inflates just a little to deal with it. Hard to see, I'm not putting that much. But here, I relax it a bit, his hand relaxes from that. I put a little pressure in it, it's almost like it's like a balloon. It blows up just to the exact amount, to match that amount of force that changes every single time. Okay? But what you don't want to do is, I'm here, and he feels a little tension here. Push here, he ends up pushing at the wrist. Once you push at the wrist, then you don't have control of it. You want to be like, think of it this way, when you're batting, right? Where is the control? You want to control at the handle of the bat when you're hitting a ball. Okay? That's where you end up doing. What you don't want to do is the ball comes in, next thing you know you're bunting. You're holding the ball, you're holding the one end here, one end here. Then you can't have the power involved with it. So same thing here. You want to have the control. The touch may be here at the wrist, but you want to have the control here at the elbow. All right? And not putting more tension at the wrist. Okay? So think about it. This is a balloon. Okay? Here's a balloon. It functions as a balloon. If I squeeze this part of the balloon, like the pressure comes from my wrist, and I squeeze this part of the balloon, what happens? If the balloon's inflated properly, the tension in his hand runs correctly, what happens? This part inflates and this part adjusts. Right? If you squeeze a balloon, it opens up on the opposite ends and adjusts to that initial force. But what happens if this balloon stays tight here? What happens? Boom! You end up popping that part of the balloon. It doesn't adjust. And that's very common. And that's the most common mistake that happens with beginners, because it's almost like a natural reaction to do that. Like if I tap your shoulder, you play a trick on your friend, he always looks behind you. So it's no different than I push against his wrist. That his natural reaction is he wants to push back to it. Okay? So from here, he wants to control it each time, aiming for my center every single time. As far as what I'm doing, the tan and bong, the most common mistake you see with the tan and bong is how the bong saw comes up. Bong saw, a lot of times people end up going like this, lifting it up and trying to bong. Bong saw, I cover the center. I go up to the center, then roll it up. If you go out like this, then basically you're trying to shoot and drill towards the center, not go out like this. So, in other words, here's my force. My force wants to go towards him, naturally towards him. I don't want to go out here and then lift up. Okay, I still want to have forward motion. You can see this. You can still see forward motion when I'm doing it. Nice and smooth before motion. If I go like this, see how it's just my elbow lifting up? Elbow lifting up? I guarantee you, if you do elbow lifting up, this is the most common mistake. If you do elbow lifting up, and then after rolling for a couple minutes and your partner's heavy on the fluke sound, then you'll be like, why does my shoulder hurt? That's a common mistake, most common mistake that happens when that occurs. That means you're lifting up here, and then you feel the force here, and automatically you have shoulder. And you continue that, you'll have shoulder problems from that. Okay? Notice what I'm doing here. I'm elbow push up, and then I turn over, and then elbow drills down, just slightly. Okay? So my elbow pushes the wrist to follow it, and then the same thing here. My elbow drops, right? And then my wrist follows, and then I still aim back smoothly into that. Okay? Let's leave it at that for now. We can definitely talk more. Maybe I'll stretch episode 11 to 12, 13, 14, and 15 because there's so much detail that we want to cover. But right now, let's make that the main points that we want to focus on with single sticky hands. Okay? Make sure you know how to do the motion first and foremost. So in other words, if you don't have a partner and you don't know how to do bong tan, work on that first before you work with your partner. So in other words, if you suck without your partner, you're going to suck more with your partner. All right? So get that down first, and then let's cover episode 12. We'll cover a little more detail on that single stick. But for that should be good to work on. All right.